The iPhone 12 is 2 years old as of now, and has recently replaced the iPhone 11 as Apple's oldest phone they're currently selling brand new, starting at $599 USD. The iPhone 12 was a much needed upgrade to the 11, finally bringing the OLED display to the mainstream iPhone model and a thinner, more premium design, bringing it somewhat closer to the Pro models in terms of user experience. And so how has each aspect of it held up from a 2022 perspective? And is it the right device for you? Let's find out, starting with the design. And by the way, timestamps are in the description if you'd like to see something specific. So in terms of design, it's not really that different from what we're seeing nowadays. Glass back, camera bump, notch and flat sides, although the iPhone 12 series were actually the first iPhones to bring back the flat sides for the first time since 2013's iPhone 5S, before they moved on to the rounded edges the following year with the iPhone 6. So the 12 series was a bit of a throwback to those simpler, more pleasant times. These flat sides got a lot of mixed opinions. Some people liked the retroness, some despised them, and some just didn't really give it too much thought, as long as their phone works. Personally, I don't mind them, but if I had to choose, I would definitely go with the rounded edges because of the superior way that they feel in the hand. They're just a lot more ergonomic. Now in general, the overall look of the iPhone 12 is quite safe and minimalist, and not too showy, in a good way, and it doesn't really look dated yet, apart from the notch, but we've been dealing with that for years now, and even so, it's really not that hard to put up with. Although the recently announced iPhone 14 Pro has initiated the move away from the notch with its whole dynamic island setup, but it should still be another couple of years or so before we start seeing this on the non-Pro iPhones. I mean, even if the notch can be a little annoying sometimes when watching a video, we've all learned to live with it. It's not really that big of a deal. Oh, and something else, the iPhone 12 was the last iPhone to not have the abomination of the diagonal camera setup, but the lack of one on here might make it appear a bit more dated in a few years. Now in terms of colors, we get black, white, red, green, blue, and purple. And may I just point out how fab this blue is. Definitely one of Apple's best colors they've ever done. In dark environments, you get a very sort of deep navy, and then in the sun, it turns into a lighter, nautical type of blue, which looks incredible. Props to Apple for that, but the green also did stand out to me. Now, when it comes to feel in the hand, the iPhone 12 is decently comfy and solid, weighing in at 164 grams and being 7.4 millimeters thick, which is a significant reduction in bulkiness from the predecessing iPhone 11, and this gives it a much more premium feel in contrast. Plus, the 6.1-inch size is in that sweet spot where you can use the phone either one- or two-handed with no problems, and in most cases, easily be able to fit it into your pocket. However, again, some may agree with me in that the flat sides aren't as nice in the hand as the rounded edges. Sometimes they can dig in a little, but these days you don't really have much of a choice anyway. I mean, every new iPhone Apple is selling has them, except for the cheapest SE. But all in all, it's a good design. The flat edges may not have been the best choice, but they're not a huge burden by any means. The phone still looks and feels fine. Now moving on to the front of the iPhone 12, we get the gorgeous OLED display, which was one of the main, albeit overdue upgrades over the 11's mediocre 720p LCD panel. Instead of that, the 12 got a 6.1-inch 1080p OLED panel with a resolution of 2532 by 1170, along with a pixel density of 460 pixels per inch. These specs were, and still are, super high-end. Everything you're viewing is going to look terrific, with vibrant colors, no visible pixels, and deep true blacks due to it being OLED. In addition, its 6.1-inch size makes it immersive for watching movies and videos, as well as playing landscape games, and it's actually thanks to these flat sides that the borders around the screen were able to be reduced. So there, I said something nice about the flat sides. You can undislike the video now. Although no display is perfect, including this one, which has a few shortcomings, which impedes on the viewing experience a lot more than the dynamic island on the 14 Pros and the shrunken down notches on everything else past the 12. But just a very minor annoyance, I don't really care too much. But one bigger con is that it's only 60Hz, not the buttery smooth 120Hz that the iPhone 13 and 14 Pros sport, which is no surprise considering Apple only put high refresh rates on their high-end phones just last year, let alone their mainstream phones 2 years ago. Now, 120Hz is by no means any kind of essential feature. 60Hz is fine for 99% of people, but if you're coming from an Android with a high refresh rate, it's going to be a bit weird to get used to. So if that's you, then a 13 or 14 Pro will make you feel more at home. And as I mentioned before, this display was a much needed upgrade over what the iPhone 11 had, which was LCD, not OLED, so you weren't getting those deep true blacks, and it couldn't show content in full HD, which many argued was just abysmal for the price point of 750 back in the day, but the iPhone 12 finally took on this problem and gave tech enthusiasts like myself one less thing to whinge about. But even if the 12 didn't get that upgraded display, still no one would have whinged about the camera setup on here, as it's still absolutely incredible. Of course, being now 2 generations behind, it's not 100% up to scratch with what the iPhone 14 series has to offer, mainly because of their physically much bigger sensors, but don't get me wrong, the 12's cameras are still extremely high-end. On the rear, we get 12 megapixel wide and ultra-wide cameras, and on the front, there's a 12 megapixel selfie camera. The main lens is sharp, with tons of detail and great colors, and will capture your memories terrifically. It's still really good. iPhone cameras really are in a league of their own, and this allows them to still feel top of the line even a few years later. With that being said though, again, the 13 series and above have much bigger lenses, which are able to let more light in and therefore produce more detail, which isn't so apparent in broad daylight, but in those weird indoor shots with iffy lighting, or in the late evening, you can definitely pick up some difference, especially in video recording. Again, this doesn't mean at all that the 12's main lens is bad in any way, it's only natural that newer models will improve things, but if you are an avid photographer, the 13 series and up will fit the job a lot better for you. Now, the iPhone 12 also has a portrait mode, which works pretty well. It can struggle around the edges of the subject at times without a telephoto lens to get a better depth of field, but it's pretty darn good nonetheless, and can take some very high-end and impressive bokeh shots. And in addition to that, the 12 also has night mode, which allows you to take extremely clear photos in dark scenarios without using the flash. And the amount of detail it can capture with such little light is absolutely mind-blowing, and it's a feature you'll use all the time. It's not just a cheap gimmick. Now, the iPhone 12 also has an ultra-wide lens on the back, and like night mode, it can seem a bit gimmicky at first, but you'll soon find that being able to get more in your shot without having to take a step back is actually super convenient. Now, it does compromise on the fine details of the picture a little, and you'll be able to see that if you zoom in, and in lower light, it reaches far from its peak, but in good lighting, the ultra-wide lens can capture a lot of area in a lot of quality. And just like the other two lenses, the selfie camera also does great, really getting those colors on point and producing really detailed and lifelike images. So if you're someone who takes a lot of selfies, the iPhone 12 won't let you down. And finally, moving on to the video recording, well, it's an iPhone, so you can really only expect the best when it comes to this, and the 12 is no exception, boasting incredibly detailed, stable and color accurate footage in up to 4K at 60 frames per second. In fact, while I used the iPhone 12 mini last year, which has the exact same setup, I filmed a lot of my YouTube videos with it. So if it was good enough for that, well, I'm sure you can imagine just how good it'll be at capturing your memories. But one groundbreaking feature the 12 introduced was the ability to shoot in 10-bit Dolby Vision HDR, which is a high dynamic range format commonly used in the movie industry. Dolby Vision gives you a much better range of color and exposure, giving your videos a cinematic look, and it absolutely delivers on that. Unfortunately though, you can only view Dolby Vision video in its full quality on a compatible display, and as luck would have it, YouTube doesn't support Dolby Vision, so the only way you'll get to see it in its best form is on, for example, another iPhone. But yeah, all in all, terrific camera setup on here. Whether you're an avid photographer or not, it's going to really impress. Now, performance on here is also still top end, as the phone is able to handle literally anything you throw at it with great ease. It sports the Apple A14 chipset along with 4GB of RAM, and the A14 is a blazingly fast chipset and ensures super snappy performance no matter what you might be doing. Playing intensive 3D games, running tons of things in the background, or even literally just checking your emails, there's really nothing to say about it other than it's a super fast phone and will stay that way for years to come. And speaking of years to come, let's talk about the longevity of the iPhone 12, which basically means how long you'll be able to use it for. Apple usually gives their phones around 6 to 7 years of support for their phones, and while it's hard to say for sure right now, the 12 has a long life ahead of it in terms of updates, which is great for anyone who likes to keep their phone for a long time. So basically, it should receive support until around 2027, although 2026 and 2028 and above are also definite possibilities. Either way, it still has many years of use left in it, so it would definitely be viable to get one now and use it until then. And finally, let's talk about the battery life. On here, we have a 2815 mAh cell, and while it's not an absolute tanker, it'll get you through the day just fine. Although, if you're a power user, you may have to plug in before the end of the day, and you'd probably benefit from stepping up to the iPhone 13 series, which has significantly better battery life. But for the most part, battery on here is still super reliable for the vast majority of people. And so, with my review of the iPhone 12 from a 2022 perspective now out of the way, and with everything the phone has to offer, let's talk about whether buying one is a good idea. And this is where it starts to get awkward for the 12. With a starting price of $599 USD, it doesn't seem so convincing when you consider that the iPhone 13 mini also starts at $599, and with that, you're most notably getting 128GB of storage to start with instead of 64, but also much more capable cameras with bigger lenses, a better chipset, and pretty similar battery life. And the only trade-off to the whole thing is of course that smaller 5.4-inch display, unless you're into small phones, in which that's good news for you. Basically, the 13 mini costs the exact same because of its size, but with significantly upgraded internals. Although, if you don't like small phones, the regular 6.1-inch iPhone 13 starts at $699 US, $100 more than the 13 mini and the 12, and it sports everything internally and externally the 13 mini does, so if you don't want that smaller screen and better battery and can go that little extra $100 mile more, the 13 is also undoubtedly worth going for over the 12. But of course, if you're into small phones or you want to save $100, or better yet, both, the 13 mini is going to be more for you. But essentially, there's really no reason to buy the 12 when there are other, much more convincing options. The 13 and 13 mini just represent much better bang for your buck for a tiny bit more, particularly in terms of the doubled starting storage. But on the other hand, if you're currently using an iPhone 12 right now, you don't need to upgrade for quite a few years down the line. Just because it's not great value now doesn't mean in any way that it's a bad phone. If it's doing everything you need it to, then you should keep using it by all means, because everything about it has held up terrifically. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, please make sure you drop me a like and subscribe to TechSpree for more reviews, insights, and the occasional unboxing. Also, if you want to see more of me for whatever reason, my Instagram is at tech_spree and my Twitter is at techspree1. Thank you as always for watching. This is Tom with TechSpree, and I'll see you as always next time.